The daily life of the ancient Greeks was both fascinating and unusual, filled with customs and habits that might seem strange to us today. But to the Greeks, these practices were an integral part of their world, shaped by their beliefs, social norms, and values. For instance, one of the most curious aspects of Greek life was their obsession with physical fitness. Gymnasiums, where men would gather to train, were an important part of social life. But what's particularly odd is that all exercise was done in the nude. Men would strip down, cover themselves in olive oil, and then engage in physical training or competitions. This wasn't just for practical reasons like freedom of movement. It was a reflection of their admiration for the human body. Gymnasiums were also a place for socializing and political discussion, so they played a much larger role than just being a place to work out. The Greeks believed that a well-trained body was a reflection of a well-trained mind. It wasn't uncommon for people to spectate these workouts, admiring the male form, as physical appearance was highly valued in Greek culture. While they were obsessed with the human form, ancient Greeks had peculiar standards of beauty. For instance, male statues from that period often depict men with small and flaccid genitalia. This was because, in their culture, large genitalia were associated with a lack of self-control and foolishness. A smaller size, on the other hand, was a sign of restraint, intelligence, and sophistication. The Greeks also had rather odd practices when it came to medicine. Their understanding of the human body was rudimentary, and much of their medicine was based on balancing bodily fluids, or humors. One bizarre example is that doctors would sometimes taste a patient's bodily fluids, such as urine or earwax, to diagnose illness. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, believed that the taste of these fluids could provide insight into a person's health. There were also some strange practices related to pregnancy tests. One common method involved placing a garlic bulb in a woman's intimate area overnight. If her breath smelled of garlic the next morning, it was believed that she was not pregnant. This was based on the idea that the scent would travel up through her body if there was no obstruction, such as a fetus blocking the way. Despite the oddities, the Greeks did make some remarkable contributions to medicine, many of which are still relevant today, such as the Hippocratic Oath. When it came to food, the Greeks had some interesting preferences. Their diet was largely based on bread, olives, cheese, and wine. Meat was consumed, but usually only during religious festivals when animals were sacrificed. They also enjoyed fish, which was readily available given Greece's extensive coastline. However, what might surprise many is that the Greeks were also known to eat insects. Cicadas and grasshoppers were considered delicacies and were often served as snacks. Their culinary habits extended to some strange medicinal practices as well. For example, mule excrement mixed with wine was thought to be a remedy for certain women's health issues. One particularly unusual belief was that athletes' sweat had magical properties. After exercising, Greek athletes would scrape the sweat and oil from their bodies using a tool called a strigil. This mixture was considered valuable and could be sold as a cure for various ailments. People believed that rubbing this sweat on their bodies could relieve pain or other physical issues. Another fascinating aspect of Greek daily life was their relationship with death and the afterlife. Greeks believed in a complex system of gods and the afterlife, where the soul would journey to the underworld ruled by Hades. Funerary customs were a significant part of their culture. Family members would place coins over the eyes or in the mouth of the deceased to pay Charon, the ferryman, to transport their souls across the river Styx. They believed that failing to provide these coins would condemn the soul to wander the earth. Religious rituals were deeply intertwined with their daily lives. The Greeks practiced sacrifices and offerings to their gods regularly, often seeking divine favor for good harvests, health, or success in battles. One of the most famous religious sites was the Oracle of Delphi, where the Pythia, a priestess, would deliver cryptic prophecies. Many important decisions, from personal matters to state affairs, were made based on her words, which were believed to come directly from the god Apollo. Speaking of state affairs, Greek democracy was another strange yet revolutionary aspect of their society. In Athens, one of the first known democracies, citizens participated directly in political decisions. However, this was not the democracy we understand today. Only male citizens were allowed to vote, and the population of slaves and women who made up a significant portion of the society were excluded from the process. The Democratic Assembly met in the open air, and any male citizen could speak his mind and propose new laws. The fact that decisions were made through public debate and voting was a groundbreaking concept, even if it was far from inclusive. Alongside their advanced political system, the Greeks also had some eccentric judicial practices. Trials were often chaotic affairs, with hundreds of jurors and no formal lawyers as we know them today. Instead, the accused and accuser would argue their cases in front of the jury, often appealing to emotions and public opinion more than legal principles. Sentences could be severe, including exile, which was considered one of the worst punishments a person could face. However, public opinion could also sway the outcome in unexpected ways. For example, the famous courtesan Phryne, when put on trial for impiety, was said to have exposed her breasts to the jury in a dramatic appeal to her beauty, resulting in her acquittal. Greek society was also highly patriarchal. Women were generally expected to stay indoors, managing the household and raising children. They had little influence in public affairs and were often viewed as inferior to men. Marriages were arranged, and love was not considered a necessary component. Interestingly, male friendships and bonds, often of a romantic or sexual nature, were considered more significant and even celebrated in certain circles. Homosexual relationships, especially between older men and younger boys, were common in Greek society and were seen as an important part of a young man's education and development. Philosophically, the Greeks pondered the meaning of life, ethics, and politics in ways that have influenced Western thought for centuries. Figures like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle revolutionized human understanding of the world. However, their lifestyles were often peculiar by today's standards. Socrates, for instance, was famous for wandering the streets of Athens, engaging people in relentless questioning about their beliefs, often to the point of irritation. His method of teaching through dialogue and constant questioning was revolutionary, but led to his trial and eventual execution on charges of corrupting the youth. In their leisure time, the Greeks loved theatrical performances, particularly tragedies and comedies. These plays were more than just entertainment, they were a form of civic duty. Citizens were encouraged to attend, and the themes often dealt with morality, politics, and the will of the gods. Theatres were open-air structures, and the audiences could be enormous, with some venues holding up to 17,000 people. At these performances, actors wore exaggerated masks to convey different emotions, and all roles, including female characters, were played by men. Apart from theatre, the Greeks enjoyed various forms of competitions. The most famous were the Olympic Games, which were held every 4 years in Olympia to honor Zeus. Athletes from all over the Greek world competed in events like wrestling, chariot racing, and discus throwing. Like their workouts in the gymnasiums, the competitors were naked, which emphasized the Greeks' admiration for the human form. Victorious athletes were celebrated like heroes and often immortalized in statues. One of the more curious aspects of ancient Greek competitions was the event known as the Pankration, a brutal mix of wrestling and boxing, with almost no rules. It was considered the ultimate test of a man's physical strength and endurance. There were also stranger aspects to Greek religious beliefs. For example, the Greeks practiced incubation, a ritual where people would sleep in temples dedicated to the god of healing, Asclepius, in hopes of receiving a cure for their ailments through dreams. It was believed that the god would visit them during their sleep and offer guidance on how to heal themselves. This practice reflects the Greeks' deep connection between health, spirituality, and dreams. Another strange custom was the Greeks' belief in magical amulets and talismans. They carried these objects for protection against evil spirits or to bring good fortune. Curses were also common. Lead tablets inscribed with curses were buried or thrown into wells, calling upon the gods to harm one's enemies. Often these curses were written in such a way as to appeal to the gods' sense of justice or vengeance. Ancient Greece, with all its oddities, was a complex and highly developed civilization. The Greeks' unique combination of intellectual curiosity, physical culture, and strange customs helped shape much of Western civilization as we know it. Their love of knowledge and debate, combined with their willingness to explore the mystical and magical, created a society that was both rational and superstitious, advanced and primitive. Even today, many of the strange practices of ancient Greece continue to captivate and intrigue us, offering a window into the minds of one of history's most influential civilizations. Though we may not understand all their customs, these quirks make ancient Greece endlessly fascinating and remind us of the complexity of human culture across time and space.